Everyone, very warm welcome to you all, and many thanks for joining us today for the return of the BSGA Sign Surgery. I'm your host and moderator, Jack Gocher, and it's a real pleasure to be guiding you through what I'm sure will be another insightful and valuable session. We have our resident industry experts here from the BSGA board, ready to tackle your questions and share their wealth of knowledge. Give a virtual welcome to Craig. Hello, Craig.
Hi.
Hi, and to Linda Edwards. Hi, Linda.
Good morning.
Good morning. Now, the sign surgery is all about you and the challenges or queries you're facing in the world of signage. We've got a few questions that Craig has received over the past few weeks, but we'd love to have your questions live in the session. So just let me know if you have a question or pop it into the chat if you'd prefer me to ask it for you. First up, we've had a question from Tony Wills, and welcome to Tony for joining us from Button Fix. And you're here with us, so please fire away with your first question.
Okay, thank you. Well, we're a panel fixing manufacturer. Actually, our products were designed originally to fit panels in places like washrooms and acoustic panels, but we found that some signage people are using our fixings. So we need to understand better the kind of problems people have in mounting panels with the standard fare that they're presented with, to see whether our products or new products that we're developing can do that job better. We only sell through distributors, so we very don't often see how people end up using our products, but we do know that some signage people use our products, and so we want to understand what their needs are better, so that as our design consultancy, we have a design consultancy as well, but our design consultancy can develop new products for that business that meet the needs of people like the sign business. So, we think some of our products do the job quite well, but of course, it's always good to know from the people on the coalface.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think. Your product won sign. Well, it was actually a product of the year.
It won product of the year. Yes.
So obviously, was
really
there any spin-off from that? Because again,
we picked up a distributor in the signage world and then another one. And we found that in America, a very big signage company in America, I don't think this was a spin-off from it, but a big signage company in America sell loads of them for signage. But we don't understand I was trained on the bench, so I kind of make things. Yes. I've never been a sign fitter. And as a designer, if you're designing a product, you need to know how people want to use it. So that's my quest, if you like, to see what kind of problems people face when they're fitting signs.
I'm with you. I think for me, when I've seen the product and my understanding of the product, it was designed, or it looked as though it was designed for small panels. And that's probably where I'm coming from. I think people look at it as something, it's a neat hidden fixing for directories and that type of scenario. They're not envisaging it being used on larger constructions. And I'm wondering if there's not enough case study examples.
You could well be right about that. Yeah. But I mean, in terms of strength, the Type 1 will break at 300 kilos on one of them. So they'll take big panels.
And I suppose that's where you come back to. It's about education. And again, we're very much as a trade association. We're coming at it from a point of view of how do we show people best practice. And it's really difficult. For us, it's always that balance. We're not pushing a supplier to help them sell product. What we're doing is trying to educate the end user and our network of sign companies that this product should be considered, because, as you said, with that weight loading, I didn't know. I've been in the industry since 1984. I was aware that your product won an award, and it won an award for innovation. Mm-hmm. Looked actually great. Preconception was use it for small decorative pieces that need to have easy removal, that type of scenario. So I would have never considered it as a mechanical fixing for a bigger sign.
Okay.
And I don't think I'm uncommon, if that makes sense.
It is true that we don't warrant it for external use.
Yeah.
And the reason is that in America, they'll sue the backside off you if they do something stupid, even if they do something stupid. So hanging enormous sheets of material when there's going to be a hurricane is not a great idea to warrant it for external use. But we know that sign fitters use it all the time externally, but we don't know how they use it, and we don't know what problems they face.
Yeah.
I was going to say, Craig, last sign surgery we had the guys from Innova presenting, And a lot of that's, again, it's an alternative to mechanical fixings, but that's all about preparation there. So one of the issues they have is ensuring that the surfaces are properly prepared in order to accept the adhesive in that case. But in terms of, and that's another alternative to mechanical fixing that's probably hard to guarantee as well. So I think that's probably a big issue, the guarantee element.
You're quite right, and that's why we have all of our products tested for failure mode. And when I say 300 kilos, I mean it breaks at 300 kilos, or more to the point, the screws break. The product doesn't break. Actually, that's the product, all the screws break at around that kind of loading. So I remember having a conversation with the sign guy before we developed the Type 1 bonded, and he said, make it from ABS because we want to solvent bond it to acrylic. And that's what we did, and it works really well in that respect.
So we're looking at it for a wayfinding project we've got in Wakefield coming up. Our go-to for flush fixing is 3M VHB tape that I don't think has ever failed me in about 10 years. It's a solid product that we trust, and it's obviously an easy one without mechanically fixing and stuff. But no, we've not really experienced button fix heavily, but we're going to enter it. But it's really good to know that it can support larger items. That's a good piece of knowledge there.
Well, I'm just kind of wondering how we get the products to a wider audience for Tony. So I was explaining to Tony, we're not here as a trade association to help someone sell a product. But if something's actually beneficial, for us, it's about education and actually sharing case studies and various bits. I know, and sometimes showing a product being used when you're not supplying the end product is quite difficult because you have to get permission from the client to show the sign going up and its usage. Again, I think this education process for me is something that we're really keen to do, especially when it's actually sorry, Tony.
Well, if it helps, I mean, actually, this is only about education for us because we only sell to distributors, so we don't sell directly. So all we want to do is to understand the marketplace of the end user so that we can best support the distributors. But that means that we need to understand, what the problems are. So if it helps you, happy to set up some sort of online or physical presentation in our studio in London. And whatever works, really.
Yeah, that might be. I mean, we've got a mixture of members, and obviously some members just specifically look at fitting signage. They're not interested in manufacturing; they are part of the process. Where other companies will have the complete remit from manufacture, meeting the customer, designing, producing, and fixing the sign right the way through the process. So again, often cost will be a prohibitive factor, and if they perceive the mechanical fixing to be above and beyond, and they don't know what the perceived benefits are, they'll go back to traditional fixing, or what we perceive as a traditional fixing. So I think the education process would be beneficial.
No, I appreciate that completely. I mean, if you want to change things, quite often it's useful to do it with a mechanical fixing rather than the tape one. I've noticed the notes. Can't drop anything into the notes. In the meeting notes, is that because you've blocked everyone from doing that?
No, meeting notes. It's the auto one. If you do it in the chat rather than the notes.
In the chat, yes, okay.
That will do it. I think the notes is the AI transcriber.
Sorry,
I think we're getting there.
Okay, cool. Well, I've just added some notes to it, so just anyway, so people know what they're doing. So just as the real reason for me coming on this is that we're about to launch the 4 new products, some of which might be appropriate for signage. So watch this space. By September, they'll be beginning to hit the market.
Yeah.
Okay. Good.
Very good.
No, that's great. I mean, Linda, have you got any? Would you have come across the products? Obviously, if I say what our class is, a traditional small sign company that gets involved with a bit of everything.
No, I would say certainly with my BSGA hat on, I was aware of your products. But again, similar mindset to Craig. But I, for one, wholeheartedly support the idea of educating our industry, educating our community. And I feel that if, like you kindly offered, if we can have a chat after the meeting and perhaps set something up where, because we, as Craig and Jack have briefly mentioned before, we have hosted other sign surgeries with regards to double-sided tape and so on and so forth. What we could potentially do, and again, this is conversations that have been taken behind the scenes, is actually having a session on on installation and on fixing. So what I think would be a fantastic opportunity is for yourself, Tony, or one of your colleagues and some other colleagues within the community to actually come together so that the session itself is on fixings and the different fixings that are available and the opportunities and the properties and so on and so forth of the products that are available. And then you yourself would be able to speak directly to sign installers or signage organisations to say, well, these are the hurdles, or this is what we're looking for. These are the objectives that we try to achieve.
That'd be fantastic. I'd be up for that. If it was physical, in other words, in a room with other people, how many people would you might expect to come to that?
The challenge is, as you may or may not be aware, the signage industry within the UK is wide and varied. And more often than not, I mean, I myself am based down south, so I'm based down in Sussex, and through personal experience, a large proportion of the signage industry exists past the South Downs. So we need to be mindful about how we can make it accessible, and certainly through our own experiences, an online forum has worked better for us. So I'm proposing that potentially in the beginning we look at an online session, and then we can see about how interest is developed and how that works for yourself, Tony, and our other colleagues. And potentially we could move forward with perhaps, like I say, a face-to-face and action day in person.
Okay, well, we've got a studio in Britton Street in Clerkenwell, but you won't seat more than 10 people. But my point is that when I put my product design hat on, I always say you've got to use the best product for the job. So I am completely open to people coming along and saying, look, this is better than your product, and we use it for these reasons, and I'm really happy about that. So we never want to sell a product into try and force people to take on board a product which isn't the right one. So if it's the right product, great. If it is the wrong product, we'd like to know about it.
So just to go back to a couple of points you've made, Tony. So you say that you sell out to distributors, and
yes.
you've been made aware that sign installers, sign makers have found, for better term, have found your product. How did that come to your attention then? So actually, are you aware that the sign industry is now looking at your product range, or how did that come about?
We do have a huge sign manufacturer in America who loves the product and sells loads of it into the sign industry. But for us, if we do either designing of products or marketing of products, we're effectively marketing and designing a bit blind, not entirely blind. I always say it's a bit like chucking information over a wall, hoping that it'll hit the right people on the other side. Because if you sell through a distributor, they're never going to tell you, well, some do actually, but they're rarely going to tell you who their direct customers are, and they're not going to tell you much information about it. So, I mean, it succeeds, but we're sort of firing arrows with an eye patch on, if you like.
Yes.
So that's what basically the education is, not just us to them, it's them to us as well. So if we're developing a new product, then we can choose to tune it for a particular marketplace.
Absolutely. And to go back to a point that Craig made, case studies work fantastically well as sign people, as sign individuals.
We've got one on our website, actually. I'll find it for you and post it in the notes.
Oh, fantastic.
Well, we've got a few, actually. They're called Insights on our website.
Okay, we'll have a look at that.
I'll put it in the notes. But I'm sorry, I don't want to hog your meeting.
I'm ready to step in, Tony. It's all right.
Go for it. Yeah.
So, Craig, you've had quite a few inquiries and questions over the last few weeks. Most of them seem to be about money, actually. So I'm going to start with the one that isn't about money, then we can get on to that for the rest of the session. The question you've had about working near or close to overhead power cables and pylons. You said that a member highlighted that as an issue.
Yeah, we had a member contact us. They were asked to do a number of signs across the UK. One of the warehouses they were looking to work on was very close to some overhead power lines and what's classed as the large pylons. And they were worried about the distance the electricity can jump, obviously, between the actual lines and the power and access equipment that they actually had. And we were discussing whether they could actually contact National Grid to either get the power switched off or diverted. The numbers that they were being quoted were quite horrific, from £5,000 to £20,000 was the cost involved to do so. But I was also informed that if the pylons go up after the building has been in situ, that National Grid will do something for you. In the meantime, the client who was having the signs done had spoken with National Grid, and National Grid had agreed to send somebody out to do an audit, and had decided that the power access equipment was safe to use in the vicinity as long as it came in from an access point. So again, it's just actually someone using the association for advice. So I went back to our technical director and actually asked for some guidance what they would actually do. They gave me some case studies to share with the member. So again, I suppose it was just the stepping stone process that person would actually use. And we discussed whether they used abseiling to come down from the building so they didn't need to pay access. We were just discussing the routes to, so we became a sounding board, if that makes sense. So they agreed, and as I said, to a process for the work to be done. Just it's not something you come up against every day, but it is something that we all have at some point in our career, putting signs near, I wouldn't say hazards, I wouldn't just say electric, any hazards. That's what decent risk assessment is all about.
Yeah, I mean, I presume as companies, you have a major responsibility to your installers and your workers. So you've got to have, that's almost really important, isn't it?
The fact I suspect you turn up at a site and that's an obvious risk. There was a sign already in situ, so somebody had already negotiated that issue. Maybe that we don't know who the original provider was. But again, it was just giving somebody the opportunity to have a discussion process. And again, it made them feel a little bit more comfortable what they were doing was right. So again, that's something more approach that maybe smaller businesses don't always have.
Okay, good stuff. So we get on to the financial stuff. You put a question, it's not really a question, but it's a question out there, but it's about the extra costs of employment having an impact on business. And then we've sort of talked about overtime rates and working lean. Perhaps you want to give a bit more of an overview of what the questions are.
Yeah, it was it's been a bit of a double-edged sword. I've had a number of people approaching us to say they're looking to employ people. Struggling to find either qualified staff or even trainees for that matter, and what route do they actually go to make this happen. But it was then a case of actually they're saying, well, the extra costs, national insurance, and maybe say that they're concerned about what's happening with work in general. Do they use the phrase, and Linda's familiar with it, how do they sweat their assets? And they're actually talking about staff as assets, which sometimes makes me feel a little bit uncomfortable, but it is a cost. It's probably the biggest cost that any business will actually have. And I was being asked when they were offering overtime, because rather than taking on new staff and trying to encourage staff to take on overtime, what rates were people paying? Were they paying a flat rate? So rather, in the good old days, if you worked on a Sunday, it was double time. That's a long gone, it seems to be a long gone thing now, if you're actually within private companies. But it was a case of getting a bit of a sound. I was hoping there'd be a few more people to kind of share their thoughts in the audience about what they were doing with their own staff. Were they just asking people to work longer hours? So again, stepping away from the traditional 38/40 hour week. Staff comfortable actually doing it? Were they pushing back for higher margins? So I was kind of, it was a question asked of me that I was hoping other people might come back to us with some feedback.
John, for Chris and Tony, may have a response to that, I guess, for those business owners.
Yes, sorry. Well, I do a bit actually. As our company has evolved, we have tried to keep the number of people down, and that isn't because we want to sweat our assets more. What we've done is we've improved the quality of life for our assets people by allowing them to do work flex time. It's very family friendly. So if the two women involved want to look after their children on particular days, they just organise it amongst themselves. So we have a no management policy in a way. Our view is that you tell people what you want done, you let them do it, you encourage them to do the best possible job, and they organise their own time. And they value that freedom more than they value and power, funnily enough. They really like the power they're given to resolve a problem and do it well. And then every other week we have a meeting. If they've made an error, the rule is that's fine. Because I always say, if it hits the fan, it's what you do about it that counts. And they have got the right and the power to go and solve that problem. So actually, so what I'm saying is that managing people, you can get a lot better out of people, I find, and have done over the years, by reducing, don't do any micromanagement, is my view. And besides which, I hate that. I hate doing it.
Yeah.
So managing people is not my forte. But I found that's worked really well. But the other thing is that we've given them incredible software to do their job. Now, I know that doesn't apply to people actually up a ladder fixing a sign. Actually, I'm wondering how AI might affect the signage world. I don't know how it will, but it might.
Tony, can I ask you what software you use to track your teams and your back end, if you will?
We use Prospect CRM, which turns out to be very good. And we use Xero to make sure our accounts are directly linked with our accountant.
Well, what will be the benefit of Prospect to the fitters?
Well, because it tells people what they've got to do when they've got to do it. I mean, you can just set up a thing saying, go out there on Tuesday and fit this sign, if they're linked into that. And we use Teams, of course. I mean, we keep the software to a minimum because otherwise you're training people forever. And we use SolidWorks as our go-to product design. I mean, that won't affect many sign people, but if you're doing any kind of engineering, SolidWorks, very expensive, but it's worth it. So we're a kind of oddball company, really. We're a niche product manufacturer with a design consultancy bolted on.
Oh, sorry, Jack.
I was going to say, what software do you use? Yeah.
So we use Shopbox, obviously like American platform. I think it's quite big in the signage community, and it's like a bespoke CRM where you can do design, send it to the customer, upload your fittings, your installs. But we need to use it more effectively, and it's been on our agenda forever. And now we're doing like north of $1 million in revenue. Obviously, we're still not a fag packet in it, but that we still need to really dial down and make the most of the jobs, upload on there, and use that as our processes. We probably don't do it enough, so I'm interested to see. I think as you grow and scale, I think it's obviously essential to have a back end CRM or an operational platform. Is what I'm finding.
What made you go to Shopbox?
I've just followed the guys for a while. I'm actually I really enjoy their podcast, Sign Shop, whatever. It seems to be a bit of a community. Obviously, it's heavily US based. The price is probably, I think we pay about £300 a month. So I think it's it's affordable, but it seems to have everything. It's quite functional, really. Have everything we need.
Yeah. It's certainly one that I've seen used quite widely across the UK. Obviously, Clarity, some people love. Again, not hugely dissimilar with the changes that they've actually made online. And obviously, there's a couple of other American products that I've seen that a couple of the other franchises are actually using as well. So it certainly means that more people can get involved. As you said, it's trying to stop that off the back of the fag packet process as you go through. My only question about Shopbox was actually what the upgrades like, because you used to, when it was a smaller organisation, I'm talking 10 years ago when it was Sign Shop, you almost could put a request in and something was done a couple of days later. I don't know if that's still the case.
Yeah, I think they do. Listen, they launched one this week, so they have jobs and job view calendars and all this, and they've launched an install calendar as of yesterday, which is really effective to us. So we're busy for the month, and I'm telling people 27th of June, but that might already be booked. So ultimately, that's the thing we'll use, the install calendar, and then work backwards from production, I think. But they're quite receptive to customer demand, I think. But obviously, because the signage industry is so broad, I mean, some people do apparel on there. Some people do channel letters, some people just do, basic print. I think it's hard to meet everyone's requirements because everybody wants different things.
Every time you talk to any of the guys that are providing this software, it's like any CRM, it's about the data that goes in at the front end. And I think people don't understand how much time it takes to set it up in the first place. Clarity was a prime example. The fact is that you have to keep the tables up to date. You have to work closely with the suppliers for the data to come in so your prices stay relevant. and you have to be prepared to actually train your staff. Tony made that point right at the front end. You know, new training comes in, or new software comes in, and you get that pushback or something else to learn. But it's a godsend. You know, it's the biggest asset I think a business can have, especially if you're looking to move the business on at any stage. And that's what somebody's actually buying. Sorry, Tony.
Well, I was at an exhibition a while back, and I just wondered if anybody in the signage industry uses a piece of kit that I've just got the website for. I've just put it in the chat. It's called Shaper. I was dead impressed with it. It's a very clever bit of kit. I thought maybe be useful in the signage industry.
Not what I've seen. I'll take a look at that afterwards.
It's basically a CNC machine that's a router, just an ordinary router.
Yeah.
But except that it's I thought it was very, very clever. I'm sure the signage industry would like that. Actually, I went to talk to them, and our products are built into their software, which I had no idea about, which is very nice.
Yeah, backdoor marketing. They like that. Clever.
Well, I don't know. They just said somebody else had asked them for it, so they put all of our CAD drawings into their kit. Lovely.
Yeah.
Very nice bit of equipment.
The other thing I was going to say, Jack, we talked about, I hate that phrase, sweating your assets as staff, was actually the remuneration, I give a word out. All staff didn't seem to just be now about an hourly rate. It did seem as though there were people who were offering some slightly different things, whether that be training, whether that be things that tied in, an opportunity to have an extra day off, changing the hours that they were actually working, which is always difficult for sign companies. So I think we're very focused on we start at 8, we're home, we finish at 5:36. We don't think about the hours outside, the flexibility of doing bits and pieces. And I wonder how we change that mindset, or is it just a battle that won't change? And again, Linda, you know, if it doesn't come through you, does it get done?
If it doesn't come through me, does it get done?
It doesn't get done. I'm just going to say with your team, how flexible, you.
I think the difficulty is that, as we know, as sign makers, as signing organisations, it's a process-driven industry. So it's okay if it's allowed, if it's permitted in one department, what's the knock-on effect to the next, as it were, that chain, that link with regards to that sort of production process. And there are in any industry, in any organisation, there are opportunities for that flexibility. So perhaps office and administration, but the difficulty comes about, as we've discussed this morning, with regards to production and installation. That's the difficulty with those arenas.
Yeah, it's always going to be, isn't it? The other topic you wanted to bring up, and I guess this is also asking the audience, as it were, is about tariffs and the effects they may or may not be having on the industry.
I think, again, as talking to people, it seems to be a down chain process or downstream from them. It's not having a direct impact with product that they're buying or shipping. One of the things we're starting to hear trickle through is that the construction industry is having an impact with them being able to source steel and the likes. There seems to be a shortage of some product, so some things are being scaled back. And obviously, if those things don't get built, the signage that would traditionally go on them doesn't get put up. So it's kind of, I suppose, it's an accumulative effect. And part of the question was, is anybody seeing that? One of the things that happened over COVID was we had this, we're great at purchasing things and just in time. Now that just in time process was thrown into a mixing pot, and I don't think it's ever totally maybe hasn't totally recovered from 2020. I think there are certainly materials that we can't still seem to be short on. And I know for vinyls, for example, that we all use, the polymers are bought 2, 3, 4 years in advance. So they're actually making judgments on how much will be used. So that, maybe what happens today doesn't get impacted on us until 18, 20, or 24 months down the line. But I was just wondering if people were seeing anything happening in that sector that they could directly put down the taps.
I think that, COVID was actually good for us, not bad for us, because lots of practical people who couldn't go to site were working at home, and the DIY market picked up, which is rather good. But in terms of tariffs, so far, touch wood, it hasn't made an impact. I mean, our product's not expensive, and we're a small company. And I often think that we probably scratched 1% of our marketplace. So we're kind of statistically irrelevant. So certainly we sell 25% of our product to America.
Yeah.
So our turnover, about just over £250,000 worth a year to the States. They don't seem to worry about this 10% because it wasn't expensive in the first place.
And I suppose, again, I know where they're saying about the paperwork is now far more intensive. You have to show where the product actually comes from.
Well, yeah, but we do something a bit clever about that we have them pick it up at the factory gate. So the paperwork's all their problem.
Oh, okay.
And actually, if you're selling to America, it's a good idea to sell at the factory gate, because if you do the business in America, Uncle Sam wants their percentage. But if you do it at the factory gate here, and all of our products are entirely made in the UK, thankfully, so that actually really helps us. So they just buy it at either from the warehouse or from the factory.
Okay. So and the export becomes their issue, not yours.
Well, we're very helpful about it, but yes. Yeah,
I think the simplistic Norfolk person.
No, that's fine. But if you want to keep it simple, actually do keep it simple. That's the answer.
And I suspect that where we'll see the changes is actually some of the manufacturing processes, specifically, companies that are actually manufacturing print heads and various bits and pieces, where those stuff are coming from, because that supply chain is the thing that seems to be causing people a headache, if you like. So, maybe the stuff that we now start to buy will become more expensive.
Well, we're not imposing tariffs, so it's only, I don't quite understand that one. In fact, in a way, they might even get cheaper because they'll be looking for other markets, i.e., us.
Yeah. Well, we have. Well, Linda knows one of our directors is tied in with a big Japanese company, and I'll leave it there. So they are looking at what that factory actually does, and whether they actually switch the process lines back on. So, the fact that they have hubs dotted all around Europe as well and in the UK, I suspect that there will be some impacts, and whether those prices are then passed on to us in the buying chain. So whether we then pass those onto our customers as well, because again we have seen material prices fluctuate quite a lot. Often I'm surprised that we're very reluctant to pass those prices on to the customer because we think we'll lose them by doing so. But other industries don't seem to worry about it quite as much as we do.
I think probably our bigger worry, even for a little company like ours, our bigger worry is that the American economy is going to tank. And once they go into recession, that will change the whole world economy. And they are going into recession. Yeah, they certainly can't carry on the way they are. Print money and do all these tariff things is not going to work for them. I mean, anybody, you don't have to have a degree in economics to work out that what they're doing is not working very well.
No. I won't get on my political soapbox. I'm not to be there, so.
No, but that's the real problem. If they go into recession, then a huge chunk of the world market is less available to us, and that will have impacts around the world, even for little outfits.
No, and we get that, and that's why I just touched on construction, because virtually every sign business that I know will have some work within the construction sector. I was like I said, I hope we could ask the question to a slightly wider audience. Perhaps we can do that as a survey at some point as well.
Yeah, I think uncertainty is the issue, isn't it? Tony says we don't know really. We can predict, but they might change everything tomorrow anyway. So it's let's not get political.
Would I?
And we would actually.
Yeah, it's been an interesting session. So thank you everyone for taking part. Thanks to Craig and Linda for your contribution as well. And we'll look forward to seeing you next time in whichever format we decide to do this in.